Okay. Hi, my name is Armando Vilaseca. I'm the outgoing Secretary of Education, and welcome to Education. Join the conversation. It is a real pleasure and honor for me today to introduce our new Secretary of Education, Rebecca Holcombe. Rebecca, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you, Armando. I really appreciate it.
One of the things that I think many of us want to know is, who is Rebecca Holcombe? Who is our new Secretary of Education? So if you don't mind telling us a little bit about your background, and both personally and professionally.
I'd love to, but Armando, I want to first start by thanking you because you've been so helpful to me in the transition, and I really appreciate both the opportunity to stand on your big shoulders as I move forward and build on the good work that you've done, and I also appreciate all the guidance and advice you've provided as I transition.
Thank you.
Where to start?
Now, you have an interesting education background yourself.
I do. I think I've probably gone to more schools than most of your viewers. I was trying to count the other day, and I figured I've been in 7 different kinds of schools. Everything from government-funded schools to homeschooling by my parents at a time, and up to private schools. I grew up, my family worked for the United Nations, so we moved quite a bit growing up. So I spent a lot of my formative years in Asia, in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan. And you know, due to political instability at the time, the schools closed in a series of countries we lived in and compelled our family to look for other options. And I think after trying to teach me algebra, my parents decided that maybe it was better to put me in the hands of a professional teacher. So I ended up coming back and going to school in the United States.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. And then your professional background, you've been teacher, you've been involved with merging of districts between New Hampshire and Vermont. Tell us a little bit about your professional background.
I started as a high school teacher, and I have had the fortune to teach both social studies and science, which is unusual because it perhaps reflects the fact that I think schools are like buffets, and there's so many exciting things. It's hard to decide, so you have to try to do everything. But after working in a high school setting, I moved to a middle school where I continued to teach, and then eventually moved into curriculum coordination. And that's where I really began to think about how you integrate curriculum across subject areas and ultimately across schools to ensure sort of systematic, consistent progress for students through those programs. But then had an extraordinary opportunity to move to Fairleigh, where I was a K-8 principal, and I really felt like I found my home. It was a wonderful town and a wonderful small school, and began to work closely with teachers in that community and with community members to provide an outstanding opportunity for our children. But at the time, Fairleigh, like many schools across the state, we were struggling because we knew we had ambitions for our kids. We wanted our children to have rich opportunities in music, in art, in information technology. Even then, people knew, and this was years ago, people knew that computers were rapidly becoming the textbooks and the pencils and papers of our time. And we knew we needed to provide access to those opportunities for our children. And we couldn't afford that in our elementary school, given the rising costs of tuitioning our students into secondary schools. And also just trying to cope with a small school where you just have to have certain functions that you perform, no matter if you have 100 kids or 200 kids, and trying to figure out how to handle that. So we looked across the river at Orford, New Hampshire, and I couldn't throw a baseball there, but I'm sure some of my 8th graders could have. And they had a robust industrial arts program, information technology, computer teacher was doing great work with the kids, great music teacher, arts, and a dedicated art room, which to us was a novelty because our poor art teacher, though she was wonderful, was pushing her cart around the hallway. And we've all seen this in the small schools. And we thought, here's a chance. We can't offer a viable 0.2 music position all by ourselves, but here's a chance to reach out to someone who's really quite close and try to do something better for our kids. And it was great for them too, because they were trying to put together this program, and they had the staff, they had the room, but they didn't have the kids. So they were really struggling with very high costs. So we hired a bus, and we rearranged our schedule so that we could send our 7th and 8th graders across the river to the Orford School and put our children in with their children. And our children were thrilled because they'd been going to school with the same 10, 15 kids. And it's great and it's wonderful, but by middle school you kind of know them a little too well, and they kind of know each other a little too well. It's like going to school with your sisters and brothers every day. So we threw them into this bigger pool with other kids, and were able to expose them to all these opportunities. And that really was the beginning of Rivendell, realizing that through that partnership we could do something better for our kids. And then the next step that led to that transformation was we looked west to communities in Vermont and West Fairleigh that were both paying at a very high rate and trying to provide for their children, but struggling, in part because of the size and because of aging facilities, to really provide their kids with some of the same things that we want to provide, and truly that many communities in Vermont take for granted. And at the time, particularly Vermont had really been struggling to hold on to staff, and they had, those viewers who are in small communities will recognize this pattern of high turnover of teachers and turnover of administrators. It's very hard to hold on in these communities, and to the point where we actually looked at some of the path of some of the students through the school, and there were students who would reach 5th grade having had a brand new teacher every year, which teaching is really, you've done this, it's really hard work. And when you begin, there's just so much to learn and so many management skills to get out of the way, even before you really can begin to engage and know the children. So we really felt that was hard. But it also, just that instability really affected the town's ability to take advantage of the resources that were available. So for example, those 2 communities were eligible for Title I money that Fairleigh wasn't. But if you got 100% turnover, who's going to write the grant proposal? Just at the most fundamental level. And they're good kids, they're people who cared in the community, but they just didn't have that capacity. So we wrote a proposal for a summer program to provide really exciting enrichment opportunities for the kids over the summer, and ended up putting together a program that served all 3 of those Vermont towns, West Fairleigh, Vermont, and Fairleigh. And and we had our students who were able to attend too. In fact, some students in our town paid to participate. It was a wonderful program, and what we really learned from that was that we really actually shared a lot of the same goals for our kids, but we weren't going to be able to achieve them by ourselves. And that's when we began to talk about what were some other ways we could produce it. So that's my Vermont school experience. And
well, one of the things that it's not one of the topics we're going to talk about today, but that whole concept of providing more opportunities for kids. And I'm glad to hear how you described that. You were really talking about opportunities for kids and how can communities get together to provide that. Funding, those other issues are separate issues, but I think that what you did was really provide all of the kids in those communities with better options and better opportunities. So that will be a topic for another day, I know.
So I hear.
Yes, but along the same line with opportunities, one of the things that we struggle here with Vermont are some of the learning gaps, the achievement gaps between different groups of kids. Can you just talk a little bit about that, following along with your experience and expertise in providing opportunities for kids?
Right. Well, I think the one that has been on many people's minds is the gap in observed learning between students from low-income backgrounds and students from more affluent backgrounds. And to me, this is a profound challenge for the state. And I was looking at the agency's own numbers, and what we've seen just since 2007, 2008, basically a 10 or 11% increase in the number of students eligible for free and reduced lunch.
Yes.
And that's just one indicator of what we know is happening, which is that more families in Vermont are really struggling, and they're struggling and they need help to provide for their children. And what we know about poverty is that it's associated with stress, that it's stressful when you're worried about whether you're going to be able to maintain your rent. You're worried when you don't know if there's going to be food in the fridge at the end of the day. And we know that stress affects people's ability to learn. At the level of the brain,
yes.
We were. At the level of the brain, if you're stressed, it impairs your working memory. You aren't ready for school, even if you're there in the seat. And the agency has embraced the challenge of preparing kids in a broad range of ways, from food security, making sure kids have security, providing supports for children. But we also need to think hard about what happens even before kids hit school. And what we do know, and what we were also talking about, is that what we call the achievement gap is already evident when kids hit kindergarten. Some kids arrive at school reading chapter books.
Right, that's right.
Other kids haven't had a chance to even see a book, and may not have some of those fundamental concepts of literacy. They don't know that books have beginnings and ends. They don't know that you read because reading can be pleasurable. Really pre-literacy concepts that kids need to have if they're going to learn to read in kindergarten. And I think what's so inspiring about coming in at this moment is really being able to build on the work that you've done around early education and preschool. we have an extraordinary opportunity right now to get involved with families as the first teachers of their children and find ways to support them in learning how to talk to their children, how to work with their children around books, how to talk to them around basic number concepts, how to work with their children behavior in ways that really help those children so that when they come into preschool, they're ready to thrive in those communities and go on. And what we know from really good empirical research is that every dollar we spend at this early level, 0 to 5, when the brain is really developing and beginning to grow, that will pay off, times 7 down the road. And so it's a leap of faith because we may not see all those benefits right now, but what we do know from really robust studies is that if we do high quality interventions early in life, when kids are still developing, that we can get huge results, not just in school, not just in terms of academic outcomes, but in terms of reduced incarceration, greater track records in the workforce, higher incomes, all sorts of factors, greater attendance and post-secondary opportunities that are just so critical to the health and the vitality of our Vermont community.
Yeah. And just so folks know, Rebecca started her day this morning with Dave Yakavone, myself, and some early ed folks talking about this issue and how to be better prepared, because we're fortunate to have a governor that is very supportive of early ed. He's very supportive of providing more supports around poverty. So we have right now a government and a House and Senate that is very much in line with your ideas.
Absolutely.
So it really is a convergence of work that will lead to better outcomes for kids.
Right, and another area the governor's been very active is this whole issue of post-secondary access and acknowledging that it's not enough to have a high school diploma, and the workforce is changing and being changed by information technology, by globalization, and that for our children to grow up and have jobs and hold jobs that let them thrive and let their families thrive, we need to be encouraging them to push into post-secondary education. And I think his press conference last week on early college access was a good indication of that, and we look forward to supporting that work.
Now, Rebecca, you talked about pre-K, which we know is probably the single most important thing that we can focus on. But the day still looks like it did 100 years ago. So we talked a little bit about how do you then continue to close the achievement gap? What are some other areas that you would think would be beneficial and that we're already working on?
Well, I think the other one that jumps out is we need to is sort of the extended day and the extended year options. And what we know is that more affluent families, they send their kids to Lego robotics camp after school. They have summer programs that are rich and rewarding. They provide violin lessons or whatever it is that help their children experience competence, develop those skills around practice and the payoff of practice and performance, and help them develop that whole set. It's not academic skills, but it's the sort of, we call them in the field, non-cognitive skills around learning how to work hard, learning how to assess your own performance, learning how to manage your own learning. These are critical skills, and some children are fortunate enough to be able to develop those in a robust way, round the clock and through the year. And it doesn't just end in June, whatever the day the school ends. And one of the things that the agency started to look into are these 21st century grants, which provide for extended days so that children in any community, regardless of where you live and what your family circumstances, have access to really rich opportunities in an extended day environment after 3 o'clock. Learning doesn't stop. You can stay and continue to be engaged, whether it's in academic support or some of the original opportunities other kids take for granted. And then also looking at ways to think about extended years or around the summer opportunities for children as well. And I mentioned earlier the summer program, enrichment program we ran in our town, which provided a unique opportunity for kids to engage academically around the year. What we know from the research is about 2/3 of the opportunity gap that we're seeing, or the achievement gap that we're seeing, can be explained by this out-of-school time. If you look at schools are actually holding their own during the school year. In fact, there's some research that suggests that schools for low-income kids are actually getting gains at greater rates than some of the high-achieving schools.
That's right.
So these gaps are not coming from the in-school time. What we need to do is find ways, whether it's supporting parents or extending how we think about the time spent on learning, to keep that learning going outside of school as well.
And one of the things you mentioned, the 21st century after school and summer grants that the agency provides to communities and to schools. At the same time, local communities will have to start picking up some of those costs because of the summer loss, as you were saying, and particularly children who live in poverty might have a greater loss that would become harder for the school then to make up. And I think those are areas that you are very interested in, and have some good folks working with you on that.
We have some wonderful folks, and we also, I think, one of the advantages of this new grant, the early learning grant that we've just received, is it gives us an opportunity to begin to think hard about how we're going to track the progress, so we can begin to evaluate which, what are we doing at the preschool level and in the early childhood level that's having an impact, so we can then sort of put those models out there for other communities to look at and learn from. We do know that some things are more effective than other things.
That's right.
Let's use our data to identify them and shine a bright light and showcase them so that other communities can take advantage of the good work that is being done in many, many Vermont towns right now.
Rebecca, I want you to go back for a second. You mentioned we just received a grant. Could you tell folks what that grant was? Just
Armando, you should tell them, because really it's the fruit of your labors.
Okay. Well, the state of Vermont just received a $38 million grant for 4 years called the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge. And it's going to be addressing the areas that you were just looking at. Provides additional support for Agency of Human Services and the Education Agency to go and provide more supports and see what is happening out there to improve early ed opportunities for kids, which we know is the single most important thing that we can do right now. Child care is another issue that we want to talk about at some other point. As you know, the governor last year tried to find some revenues to provide additional supports for families who are struggling around child care. So the Race to the Top grant is a 4-year grant, multi-agency work between education and human services. So that'll be a wonderful opportunity for you to improve the opportunities for kids that we're having right now.
Right. And I think the truth is we share many of the same goals as the Agency of Human Services, and working and collaborating with them to support this challenge around early learning, birth to 3, or even prenatal care, is critical for us in the schools, because whatever work we can do to support families early on will pay off in terms of better outcomes in the schools down the road. So really this is a joint enterprise.
The challenge...
And the other piece, just to call out, because you mentioned childcare, is that we know that different communities may have different strategies for solving this, and we also know that one of the barriers to preschool access has been that 10 hours a week is not enough. If you're a single parent, you can't afford to leave work in the middle of the day to pick up your kid and try to take him someplace else. You need daycare that extends beyond that 10 hours of what we hope will be universal pre-K. And so there is a powerful place and role for partnerships between public providers and private providers here to make sure that we're really making sure that this program and this opportunity of universal pre-K is accessible to all families as well.
And I think that also folks to realize that Rebecca and the Department of Children and Families, Agency of Human Services, Department of Health work very closely together. So it's not education here and DCF here. It really is a collaborative between and we have some different goals, but we try to work together to achieve those goals.
And what's nice about the new quality indicators and the frameworks is what it's specifying, what it's allowing us to focus on is what it will look like if we do this well. And then we can each work together to add our little piece to make sure that we have this comprehensive system of support for families that achieves the goals in the framework, but acknowledge that different communities may have to address those goals in different ways.
And one of the challenges that we've had, and I know that Dave Iacovone, the Commissioner of Children, Department of Children and Families, is the quality indexes for those folks.
And that's critical, right? And you know this better than I do, but for pre-K to have that big return that we've talked about, that $1 of investment translating into $7 of benefit down the road, it really is about quality, and it's about making sure that we have high quality educational program. It's not play, it's intentional, deliberate use of play to further learning, and it takes expertise, it is a skill, and it requires somebody who really knows what they're doing. And I think what's so exciting and powerful about the grant is it's going to enable us to really spend some hard time looking at what those indicators of quality are, and then thinking about how do we build the capacity to meet those standards in private settings and public settings across the state. But at the end of the day, it is about the benefit to the kids, and that's what this grant is going to focus on.
So we're excited. I think that in 4 years from now, because it's a 4-year grant, we will see Vermont's early education community rise to a place that we can only dream about today.
Right, and acknowledging actually that there's wonderful work being done in pockets across the state, and part of it is it's going to allow us to go back and systematically look at that work, see the places where they really are seeing benefit, a lot of this is already being done, and it's about spreading that, helping closing that opportunity gap. It's about being systematic, about asking, is this intervention that we're trying, is this program that we're using really getting us the results we want for our kids? So it's going to challenge us to be systematic, not just about the work we do in our own site, but about asking whether it is being done systematically across the state for all kids in all communities.
And that is, I think that for a small state, we don't always communicate as well with each other and to learn from others. Because when we talk about equity, we've talked about financial equity in the past around Act 60 and Act 68. We've achieved that. I think the challenge now is the equity for students' outcomes and what are they receiving in their individual schools, whether they are in Newport or St. Albans or Bennington.
Right.
And that's a challenge that I think as a new secretary, it'll be one of those goals that I think that I know are already working on.
Right. Well, I have to also acknowledge some of the work you've done around the use of information technology and supporting opportunities for online learning. And there are towns that are isolated, and you can't, it's hard to get over those mountains sometimes. And I think the governor has really made a point of pushing for digital access in every corner of the state. And I know you agree with me that this really is one of the civil rights issues of our time. If you, as a child in a school, do not have access to high-speed internet, you're not part of the 21st century.
That's
and that is something we have to encourage. And I appreciate the governor's strong support for that initiative, because once every school is networked and has that high-quality, high-speed access, we've opened the world to them. And in terms of sharing of practices, we are now using some of the tools that you've developed, whether it's the VE squared or the VLN. What we've got is the capacity both to showcase and push out models from other regions, so people can learn from other schools that have tried effective practices, can see what's being done in real time, and learn from those experiences. But also, schools can access some of our online resources to enhance and enrich the curriculum at their own sites. And without
that, and without the broadband, teachers can't access that, so students aren't getting the opportunities that they should be that should be available to them. And these are, and I think in a rural state like Vermont, access to broadband, particularly in some of the more isolated, not just schools, but then children who go home. We talk about one-to-one computing. It's great to have a computer, but if I go home and I don't have internet, it limited what I'm able to do. So that's an area.
We'll start with schools.
We can't
do everything.
Start with schools. Well, I remember when I was a superintendent of school, we used to keep our Wi-Fi on because there was no high-speed internet in the community, so people would park in the parking lot.
Well, even honestly, even in the town of Norwich, I see every night, I see people parked outside the library for the same reason. And that is the challenge. Not every house is on the internet. And if you're in many schools already have these one-to-one initiatives. It makes it really hard to do your homework if you don't have access to the internet. And that's the challenge on the other side.
And that goes, that whole, and again, and I'm not even talking about poverty, but just people who are struggling right now financially. And with the numbers have gone up in the past few years, there are more and more children who are struggling with not just the basic things, but just some of the things like being able to get online, to be able to do homework, do research.
Absolutely.
So those are all things that.
But on the flip side, I was talking to, there are many schools in the state that are already experimenting with these one-to-one initiatives, and I think the challenge of any change is it takes a while for us to really see the power of it. The first year is kind of rough, and the first year you go one-to-one, no one wants to give up their textbooks until they know that the alternative is better, right? And I understand that. And I think, Peter Drescher in the agency talks about sort of the cycle of implementation. And when teachers first use these one-to-one devices, they're often using it like an online file cabinet.
Yes, they are.
And then they begin to really experience the transformative power. And when you watch some of these schools where kids are working one-to-one, first of all, it's amazing. I mean, I look at what the kids are able to do now, and it far exceeds what I ever could have done in college, and it really is powerful. But the other thing is that that child in a rural community, isolated up somewhere, wherever on the Canadian border, can take a course online, anywhere in the country, really. They can exchange, they can have foreign language conversations with people from halfway around the world. Their library is no longer limited to what they can physically hold in their building because it's online now. The power that gives children in terms of having access to information and ideas is amazing, and I'm really hoping we can realize that.
And it's just really, we're just scratching the surface.
Absolutely.
Because many of us, as our digital immigrants, if you will, where even though we're trying, we may not have those skills that those youngsters who are growing up today that will have be used to having an iPad or a laptop or a tablet as part of their learning.
Right. Here we are both sitting with our paper and pens.
And here we are sitting with our paper
We both have
and
an
pens.
iPad over there. We could have done that as
Right,
well. No,
that's
it's true.
right.
It is true.
It's true.
It
It's
is
true. It is true.
So we're going to count on those young people to change the world for us.
So I think, Rebecca, as we're wrapping this up, I want to thank you for taking this position on. I know it's a lot of responsibility. You have a wonderful vision. You have some great ideas, and there's that congruence between your philosophies, the governors, the State Board of Education, and I think that the agency and ultimately the kids of Vermont will be better served for you being here. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Armando. And I can't thank you enough for the strong foundation you've laid. I feel like there's so many positive, strong initiatives for kids in place already, and I just hope to help take them to the next level.
Well, I know one level you will be taking us to, and that will be education. Join the conversation. I will be passing the torch today to Rebecca, so in the future, this will be your show, and you will have, I can't wait to see it on a monthly basis, because I always learn when I bring guests here, things that I should have known, that didn't know, or things that I never even had heard of. So I think that you will be a wonderful host for this show, and we'll continue to share with the Vermonters the great things and the challenges going on in education.
Thank you, Armando. And hopefully in the next couple months, we're also hoping to take the show on the road.
Yes.
And enable viewers to maybe see some exciting work in the field as well.
All right. Good.
Thank
No
you.
pressure, Chris.
Thanks.
Anyway, thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure hosting this show. And have a good night. And again, thank you for joining education. Join the conversation.